Hey everybody, welcome back to the Live Ultralight podcast powered by Outdoor Vitals. This podcast is all about getting you outdoors more comfortably and more confidently so that you can disconnect from this crazy world that we're in and reconnect with yourselves in the vital outdoors. Today, we had a special guest. This is Maggie Slepian. Maggie is a Montana-based writer and editor with a decade of gear testing experience. She's an avid backpacker, bikepacker, climber, horseback rider, horse stunt rider, as well as a skier and mountain biker. Maggie has covered thousands of miles in long-distance trails. She's a thru hiker and recently did a massive trip on her bike, which we will talk about in this episode. As a writer, she's also been featured in Outside, Runner's World, and Backpacker Magazine, and a ton of other publications, which we cover in this episode. So in this episode, I interview Maggie. We talk about a very recent trip to her where she's bikepacking the Great Divide mountain bike route. I had to get that right, which follows closely along with the CDT. This is her first trip, so it's really interesting to kind of get a more entry-level bikepacker's experience of doing a massive trail, and especially someone who's also thru-hiked. I really enjoyed the conversation there. It obviously ends with a bit of a twist because she didn't quite finish at this time due to some events that occurred. So make sure to listen into this, and it's interesting. I keep interviewing more and more people that are doing bikepacking, and might be something that I have to give some thought, some real consideration to, if for nothing else, to open up some more routes that I can do in, kind of the 5-day windows that's a little bit easier for me to get out away from the office and from my growing family. So really, really fun. It's fun to talk to her about just riding in the outdoors and, again, horse stunt riding for movies. Just a totally interesting person, so dynamic, so fun. Really appreciated her coming on, and I think you guys will love this episode with Maggie Slepian. Well, Maggie, it's good to have you on the podcast. It's been a minute since we've got to talk. Last May, we were down in Zion National Park doing some backcountry backpacking, which is where I got to meet you and get to know you a little bit. Found out you're a what I would call a power hiker. You were cruising on the trail. We were covering some big miles that day and just catching some amazing views. So good to catch back up with you.
Great to be here. Thanks, Tayson.
Knowing you haven't been sitting around though. In fact, it sounds like you just got off the trail pretty recently, right? You were doing some bike packing. Maybe I'd love to hear more of how you got onto that trail and how things went. So
sure. From the beginning?
I kind of want to hear from the beginning, because I think bikepacking, this is like your first bikepacking adventure, right?
Yeah. Yeah, for the most part. A couple years ago, a friend and I packed our full suspension mountain bikes by using ratchet straps and stuff sacks, and ratchet strapping our stuff sacks with our gear onto our full suspension mountain bikes. And we had we did 110 miles in a day and a half. And we did an overnight, basically got back the next morning. We're really confident because we covered good miles on our full suspension bikes on a route that did not need a mountain bike, but it's all that we had, up kind of by Whitefish, Montana. And so we were pretty confident. And so we took the bikes later that season with the ratchet straps and the stuff sacks. It just kind of like the goofiest looking setup down to Colorado to do another overnight route that was shorter, 77 miles, but had a good amount of vert. And so we drove like 12 hours down to the start of this route in Colorado, and we bailed on the first climb because we just could not do it, like physically. And I remember it was kind of the first thing I've ever actively quit in just there's no way we could do this type of thing. We didn't give ourselves nearly enough time. And so we were halfway through the first climb. We were like maybe 1,500 feet into the first 3,000 foot climb on these really heavy bikes. And we have all these like leathery spandex clad road bikers down in Boulder, just blowing past us on road bikes. And I was lying kind of on my side in a pullout on the side of the road, going up this mountain road outside Boulder. It was 90 degrees. And so we quit. Gosh. And they're asking, are you okay? And I was like, just move along. And so that was my first experience with bikepacking a couple years ago. And so since then, I've had one or two successful overnight bike trips, but never any actual bikepacking. And so switch my setup up every time. And then I finally kind of got a bike bag setup this past summer, or I guess like earlier this summer, and streamlined my setup, got rid of the panniers, got rid of the stuff sacks, got rid of most of the ratchet straps. And
yeah. So wait. So how were you doing this before? Were you just wearing a bigger backpack, or how are you attaching things without like bike packing accessories?
So when we had everything kind of just fumbled together, I had a stuff sack that I tied to my handlebars. I had a seat post rack that I think bike messengers use that I attached to my seat post, and then tied another stuff sack to that. And
so
then
it's just kind of dangling underneath a pole type of thing.
It was, yeah.
Okay.
It was not super secure. And then I wore a backpack, and I had pictures. I looked so proud of my first overnight bikepacking trip. It is, they're on the internet somewhere, but because I wrote about this trip, because I was like, I'm a bikepacker now. But I looked real goofy. And I think we ran into, the first time I heard about the Great Divide actually was on this Whitefish overnight, not the one that we failed in Colorado, but the Whitefish one that we succeeded at. And we saw this guy, we were heading probably north and he was heading south, and he had a legit setup, and he had maps in like this clear cover, and he had what I now know is like a Revelate Sweet Roll, which is a more secure bag that goes on your handlebars, and it's actually built for this. And he had a cool, like streamlined setup, and he's like, I'm riding the Great Divide, and I started in Banff, and we're like, oh, we started like 30 miles that way, and we're falling apart. And he looked so cool, and he's like, I'm riding to Mexico, and we're like, oh, we're riding a loop, and we're going to be back in town tomorrow getting pizza. And I just kind of like my first experience hearing about the Appalachian Trail when I was doing like a 3-day trip with my dad in the White Mountains. I was like, wait, this goes that far? The thing that we're on goes so far. So it was cool to kind of experience another like little light bulb moment with my goofy looking mountain bike.
That's the interesting thing about bikepacking to me. So we were just out on the Colorado Trail, and we're passing a lot of bikepackers in the San Juans. And this one kid, he was diehard. He was doing 75 miles a day on the trail. He was like only 7 days in and just crushing it. And it just got me thinking, I'm like, he's hitting a town every day. You know what I mean? Like he's getting pizza every day. Like this is such a different way to experience. I mean, for one thing, a long trail, but yeah, it is pretty captivating to be like, yeah, you want pizza today? Or you want a burger? Like every day you're out in the mountains and doing that.
Totally. Yeah. The amount of ground you can cover that's kind of what was more, not like the most, but it was definitely an appealing aspect of taking on the Great Divide on a bike was, okay, we can do between 50 and 75 miles a day, not off the couch really, but like without really much training. My partner and I are, we keep like a decent baseline fitness, but nothing extreme. And the extreme people are starting out doing 75 plus a day, and I'm not extreme. But we're still, aside from like there were definitely some more remote sections that we went through, the Great Basin and then a lot of New Mexico. But you can kind of look at
describe, maybe describe what the trail is so people kind of understand where does it start, where does it end, what kind of mileage it is.
Sure. So the route that I'm talking about is the Great Divide mountain bike route, and it's kind of known as one of the premier off pavement, like off front country bike routes in the country, maybe in the world. Is one of the first, and it's the Adventure Cycling Association is the people who developed it and kind of routed it, and they had these incredible map sets that we used on the route. Starts at the Mexico border, ends in Banff, Canada. It kind of follows the Continental Divide. It parallels the CDT, so the Continental Divide Trail that people backpack. And it intersects with some of the same towns. And if you look on the map, it actually intersects with the trail in some places. So sometimes you're following the same 2-track, the same 4-wheel drive road, sometimes the same paved section as the CDT. And we did end up seeing some CDT hikers actually who had to take some alternates. And so if the CDT hikers get snowed out of the really high peaks, they will occasionally jump down and they will do the Great Divide mountain bike route alternate on foot, which honestly, it did not seem fun to be doing some of those alternates on foot because we're covering, we're going like 10 or 12 miles an hour. And sometimes you're just like, wow, this stretch is like so boring. They were doing it on foot. And so basically what it does is it follows the CDT, but you're able to do it on a gravel bike. So Matt, my partner, and I both had rigid drop bar bikes. And so really not that much technical. Some of the riding in New Mexico felt a little bit tricky. And then up in Montana, which we didn't get to, which I will explain in a little bit, which I've ridden a lot of it in Montana on different trips. But this trip, this trip was cut short, which we'll get to. But yeah, so it's mostly on gravel and dirt roads, some pavement. I think I'm going to get this wrong, but 67% pavement, and then whatever the rest of 100 is. Oh, no, I'm sorry. 67% off-road, like dirt, gravel, single track, very little single track. And then the other 30 something percent is paved. So you are in pavement sometimes, but most of it is national forest and BLM land and two track.
So what was like the most attractive part of this trail for you to sign a month or 2 of your life away to try this? I'm assuming a month. I don't know.
Yeah. So the goal was 2 months on it to get, it's 2,700 miles. I figured start out doing in the 50s per day and increase mileage into the 70s or kind of whatever conditions, headwind, surface, elevation gain per day would allow, and my body, obviously. And the thing that seemed the most appealing was I can cover a similar distance as one of the Triple Crown trails, but I don't have to I don't have to allot. I know. I'm not really in the mood to do a 6 month through hike, to be honest. I don't have to allot 6 months of my life, and I can cover a huge part of the country. And also, it was something I've never done. Was an extended bikepacking trip. I've never ridden this bike for that many miles. I've never done more than 2 days at a time on a bike with bags on it. I've never ridden like a more streamlined bike bag racing setup before. Racing setup being like how lightweight we were, because I love my lightweight gear, and I like to travel light because it makes my life easier in the backcountry. And so it just seemed like this would be a cool adventure to do. I feel like I've covered a good amount of ground on foot, both on 6 month trails and 10-day trails and 2 month trails, and so it was just something totally different to see if I could do it.
Yeah, no, it's got to have a whole different set of challenges, just keep you on your toes, all that kind of thing, especially when you've already through hiked, you've done a lot of these other aspects of things to do outdoors. So you go down, you get dropped off on the doorstep of Mexico and start, right?
Yeah. And then, so most people go, CDT is kind of, I was talking to some CDT people, and it's pretty even right now with northbound and southbound. On the Great Divide mountain bike route, the majority of people go southbound. So they're going to start in Banff and then head down to Mexico. And we went the opposite way, kind of based on Matt's work schedule. He's a guide, like a backpacking guide. And so he had to be back around this time to start to work a little bit this season. So we figured it would also be easier to get back home where we live in Montana if we ended up north. So we figured we'd take care of the logistical nightmare of getting down there, which it was a nightmare. Traveling with bikes is oh my God. I'm used to traveling with a backpack, and traveling with bikes is just oh God, it's terrible. And so, yeah.
Like, are you trying to get like buses and shuttles down there? Is that why it's terrible?
I mean, it just, the logistical, we're not super experienced cyclists. And so they took my bike apart, or the bike shop took my bike apart and shipped it through this third-party shipping thing. I had so many logistics. I hired a shuttle to pick us up at this place. We flew to El Paso, Texas. We had the bike shipped before, which I didn't know if I was going to be able to put my bike back together. I watched YouTube videos. It was like mostly correct. And so, yeah, honestly, I didn't. Yeah, I was on this big descent and my handlebars flipped upside down because someone didn't tighten them well enough, and that was me. So there was other things too. It was almost a comedy of errors. I can't believe, we did what we did, considering how little I really knew about this. It was so much harder than a through hike. So yeah, we flew from Montana to El Paso. We took a 3-hour Greyhound from El Paso to Lordsburg, New Mexico. Yeah. And then, but we also, when you think about it, you're traveling with your bike bags, and they're all small and they're all weirdly shaped. We don't have panniers. And so we have frame bags that are triangular, and they go in the triangle in your frame between your top tube and your bottom tube. We have seat post bags, which are also triangular shaped, and they go under your seat. And I'm assuming there's going to be show notes. I can have pictures of my setup in that, because it's kind of hard to explain. And so, yeah, you have your other triangular shaped bag, and then you have your front roll, which is just this like kind of inconvenient roll bag that straps onto your front handlebars. And then you have a few smaller bags for snacks and water bottles and incidentals. And none of those bags are shaped in a way that was convenient for a carry-on. And so I bought a duffel bag at Goodwill that I was just going to leave down in New Mexico. because I was like, I need to get my stuff down there. And I had shipped the bike separately. So I bought a duffel bag to leave at the bike ranch in Hachita, New Mexico. And then I gave Matt a plastic tote that he put all of his stuff in. So we checked a tote and we checked a duffel. We used one of the weird triangle shaped bike bags as carry-ons. We wore our town clothes and our biking clothes on the plains. And then Matt had to like walk around El Paso, Texas, holding this tote of all of his stuff because we didn't have bags. And so we just we tried to like carry it together, like walking around, like walking across El Paso, like this one neighborhood area. It was so stupid. And then we got picked up a couple hours later in Lordsburg. And then it was another hour or so, maybe a little less, to the Hachita bike ranch. And then we left Bozeman at 6 a.m. We were putting our bikes together around 11 o'clock that night. And then we just gave up and went to sleep. And then finished putting our bikes together in the morning. It was real goofy.
Yeah. Sounds just a lot more logistics to get to that trailhead, get started out.
Yeah. People I talked to were like, oh, my parents dropped me off. Oh, I had a friend drive me. Oh, my friend drove me to here. And then I was like, oh, cool. Matt and I, no, we were just like completely on our own, just trying to figure out like, how do we get ourselves, our bags and our bikes to this, like to Antelope Weld in New Mexico. It's like a random like outpost in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, literally.
Truly. Yeah.
Got to be the middle of nowhere.
A lot of people do it. And for some reason, it was just, it felt hard.
Yeah. So you get your bike mostly assembled. You start off on this trip. What like take me through like the first couple days or first week? Like what changes or how did it go compared to expectation?
I was like, I'm so good at things. I'm going to be so good at this. This is going to be no exception because I'm really good at things. And I got on the bike and I was like, I'm really bad at this. I am so bad at biking for a long time. My body hates this. I hate this. This is horrible. It is hot. I am having a heat stroke. I am literally throwing up. Like it is, what is wrong with me? And
oh no.
It was so hard. And I just remember finishing the first day, doing 50 miles, relatively flat terrain, but hot. And I was like, oh no. Oh, this is harder than I thought it was going to be. And we get like in the 40s and I just like come to like kind of like this like slow grinding halt and Matt's getting further and further ahead. And I was like, something's wrong with me. I feel sick. And it was heat exhaustion. Like I live in Montana. Yeah. It was like 40 degrees when we left here and raining. And then it was 90 degrees with full sun exposure. Like I'm a fragile northern creature. And so it turns out I had like pretty severe heat exhaustion that first day and then the next day, and the day after that. And so getting used to that was really hard. And I just remember being a little bit stunned, like, because I went to the Colorado Trail a couple of years ago and blew myself away with how many miles I did and how fit I felt and how good it felt. And then Arizona Trail the next year, I did a couple hundred miles.
When you came to Zion with us, like you were flying and you kept saying like, oh, it just feels so good to like get out of the house and move. And like you're flying down the trail, right? I
was like off the couch in Zion. I was like completely out of shape. Mm-hmm. And I still felt like, oh yeah, I'm so good at hiking and backpacking. I can push big miles. And so I thought it was going to be the same thing on a bike. And let me tell you, it was not. It was so much harder than I thought it was going to be.
Both aspects. Both aspects, like biking, but the heat. So I typically am wearing like a Garmin watch, right? Mm-hmm. And it was like starting to get hotter in Utah. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that Garmin started reporting on was like my heat acclimation. And like for like a month and a half, my heat acclimation was 1%. And I'm like, it's getting way hot here. Like I'm sweating buckets. Like I'm at 1% heat acclimation, And then like finally I went on like a run and it was really hot. Like I was like, this is really hot. And it like moved to like 14% heat acclimation. But it just like, I would think about you coming from Montana and maybe other parts of the country, like they just don't recognize this. But I think like humans really do like adapt for seasons and their body changes and sweat rate changes and all these different factors. And so I can only imagine that was a shock to the body.
It was an absolute shock to the system. I think that puts a while. I was listening to another podcast kind of about the crazy heat in the country, and it was Phoenix has a heat expert or something. I can't remember, but and he was saying it's like heat is one of the things that we don't consider to be a deadly factor because it's not like heat comes through and devastates a town and flattens buildings. It comes through and it leaves and everything looks the same, but it's so dangerous, and so we don't consider it. But yeah, I really struggled, and I was very New Mexico was beautiful, but it's a really hard way to start that route. I think my cat wants to come in. I'm sorry. Do you want to come in? You can come in. Come here. Oh goodness, I'm so sorry. This is just the way I live my life.
Fine.
It's a weird cat lady. So yeah, New Mexico is the most remote of, so the Great Divide goes through New Mexico, Colorado, Wyoming, Montana, and then a few hundred miles into Canada. And New Mexico is the most remote. It has the longest water carries, the longest food carries that you'll encounter on the route. And also some of the hardest terrain. And so it was about 700 miles to get through New Mexico. And it was extremely challenging. And did it, some days in the 70s miles, not in the degrees. It was way warmer than that. Because we started June 6th, I think. But most days I was in the 50s, and it wasn't like some of the 50-mile days would take me all day, but my body was just done biking in the 50s. Yeah. And I was so frustrated with myself because I feel like I don't have a lot going for me athletically, but I can really just go far. And I really haven't had, I'm sorry, that's my cat's butt. I haven't had an issue going far backpacking. And I kept thinking, okay, like I'm just going to start getting accustomed to being on a bike, and the miles are going to start coming. And it really felt like every day was a push to get into the high 50s or even low 60s. And
I think if you're not a biker though, like 50 miles sounds like a ton of miles to me. Like I'm not a big road biker, gravel biker. I've done some mountain biking, but like I personally, I've never spent an entire day on a bike, right? Like sun up to sundown type of riding. So to me, 50 miles sounds like a lot, but it sounds like you're being pretty hard on yourself for 50 miles.
I am being hard on myself. And I think I don't know. So in kind of like that long distance world, I was thinking about this actually. There was a lot of mileage comparison. We didn't run into a ton of other northbounders, but everybody wants to know, how many miles a day are you doing? When did you start? That's casual. And so it's little comments like that. And so then we started running into people doing long sections, and then some people who had started very, very early up in this area that I'm in now, who we ran into in Colorado. And, I'm struggling with the surface. I'm struggling with the headwind. I'm struggling with the climbs. I'm struggling with the heat. And then we run into, some guy in spandex with, he's wearing his clipless shoes, and I'm in my flats, and I have a good setup, and I have lightweight gear, and I'm fairly fit. But, we said, oh yeah, we started, this day, and we're doing this many miles. And he's like, oh, that's like a really nice, relaxed touring pace. And I'm like, really? I am killing myself here.
I'm gonna slap you, dude.
I still knew he wasn't even smug. I don't know. I'm trying to give him the benefit of the doubt, but it was little things like that made me so overly self-conscious and thinking like, I'm out here doing, biking hundreds and hundreds of miles on, some good surface, some rugged surface. And I still am being somehow made to feel like I'm not doing enough. And it was just such an interesting commentary on this mindset that people get into, and how when you're on the route, sure, maybe in the 50s and low 60s is not impressive. In general, that seems like a lot of biking to me. I haven't biked 50 miles since I've been back. No, thank you. So
you're like making me think about everything I say on podcasts and videos. And I hope that anyone that's listening, like, just because sometimes we'll get out there and crush big mile days, like, by no means do I think anyone and everyone needs to. And in a lot of ways, big mile days aren't always the funnest and like what I aspire to do. Like when we just barely went out on a trail, what typically happens with my group of, team members is when we go out to do like 100-mile section, it seems like everyone just eggs each other on to put in a couple more miles at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. And then by the time it's done, what always happens is we do 100 miles in like 4.5 days. And I'm like, we had all of day 5. Like, why did we need to kill ourselves? Like, we could have been sitting by this lake, and we could have taken a nap during lunch. Like, it would have been awesome. And so I think everyone should have their own experience. And I hope that I'm not perpetuating any of that, to just general hiking, but definitely, to me, like it's a different ballgame too. When you're loaded down with gear, you're not in spandex and clip-ins, it's just a totally, totally different, and your bike doesn't weigh 5 grams,
But all of you with Outdoor Vitals are the most intense athletes in an outdoor brand I've ever been with. And I take probably, between 4 and 10 media trips a year, kind of depending on what my through hiking life looks like and what my other travel looks like. And you guys are so intense. I'm like, oh, these are all like, these guys are not sitting in an office talking about materials. They're out hiking 25 miles a day talking about materials. Who are these people? That's why, I mean, that trip was so fun because I felt like you guys are, I do work with a lot of brands, and you guys were one of the only brands I've worked with who are really out like doing like quite impressive things in the backcountry. So I'm sure that
I think over time, one of our employees kind of started to say this, and I feel like we probably resonate with it a little bit. Like, we love all things outdoors. I love backpacking 1 mile with my kids and going to a lake. Mm-hmm. I love doing all that. But in a lot of ways, we look at backpacking like a sport, if that makes sense. And so we do kind of push the boundaries of performance at times, and what can we squeeze into our lives with I mean, most of the guys have kids, and we all have jobs, careers. So no, it is. We do love to get out there though, for sure. But anyway, so you get through this first week. Like, did you have any doubts at that point, or was it just more like figuring out your pacing?
No, I had doubts every day. So the other thing, I think one of my detriments on this was, and I'm making it sound negative. It was an incredible experience, and I'm really proud, and it was really cool. And I don't have to go do those miles again. But I think one of the detriments was my through hiking experience and being so comfortable backpacking. And so if you're backpacking, your surface matters to a certain degree. But if you're walking on washboard, or you're walking on rocks, or you're walking on softer dirt, it doesn't super matter to the extent that it does on a bicycle. And so another thing I didn't quite take into consideration was the headwind and the surface. So elements that you don't think as much about when you're backpacking. And so Matt and I would be biking 10-ish miles an hour on a moderate terrain, maybe slightly uphill, maybe, moderate, whatever. If you turned, because the wind would pretty much stay consistent in a direction during the day. But okay, so you're biking and you have no wind at all. And then the wind starts picking up at a certain time. You're going from 10 miles an hour to fighting for your life at 5 miles an hour, and you're dropping gears. And we'd be in granny gear just fighting 40 mile an hour headwinds. It feels like you're just being pushed backwards. And it is so demoralizing. And sometimes you're on really rough surface too. And so you go from really nice hard packed dirt to sections of loose sand and rock, and steep downhills that end in sand pits that then you kind of get, you come to a screeching halt and sometimes slide off your bike and then have to stop and push your bike back up. And so you're contending with so many other factors that I hadn't considered when I was thinking about, I'm switching from being on my feet to being on a bicycle. And so, you can cover a lot more mileage, and, you get a lot of free miles too. If you have a tailwind and you have anything downhill, those are basically free miles, which you don't get backpacking. So backpacking is a lot more moderate. It's more in the middle. You're at like a 4 effort to an 8 effort. And biking, you're at like, you could be at a 0 effort, just standing up on your pedals and flying down 12 miles of a descent. But then you could be fighting for your life going up at an 8% grade for 20 miles. That's an exaggeration, but
so you're not selling me on this.
No, it was really cool. People, I loved it. I cannot wait to do more short bikepacking trips.
Okay. So take me through where does it change to enjoyment in this trip?
I was enjoying it the whole time, and every day was a struggle. So I know from through hiking that I would have days that felt easy. This bike route, so we were out there, which I gotta make sure I get to what happened, because we didn't finish. But I would have days, I think I had maybe 2 or 3 days that did not feel like I was really really working hard. Whereas like sometimes backpacking, you have chill days, and the bike route, like it was either heat, headwind, rough surface, or just my body was just really tired. So every day felt hard, and I really enjoyed it. There were some really incredible days. Going past the Wind River Range was unbelievable. The passes in Colorado had surprisingly really nice grades for the route. And so I would see these passes coming up and just kind of freak out. I struggle immensely with anxiety, and my anxiety was like pretty strong on this, thinking about the biking for each day. But the passes were fine. You might be climbing for 15 or 20 miles, but you're at a really moderate grade and you can stop and you can eat a snack. And so, and the climbs in Colorado were so rewarding, and New Mexico was gorgeous. So it really was incredible. And it was much more challenging for me than I thought it was going to be. And I know that's not that's not what I hear from a lot of people. A lot of people are surprised, like, oh yeah, it felt fine. I'm like, did it? Like, I thought this was really hard.
Mm-hmm.
So then, yeah, we got into, so let's see, crossed New Mexico, crossed Colorado, we got into Wyoming, and we were, I'd say like the majority of the way through Wyoming, heading towards Jackson, and Matt started feeling sick in the basin, which the basin is something I never have to do again in my entire life, the Great Basin in Wyoming. And so I'm glad I crossed it on a bike and not on the CDT. So did that. Matt started feeling kind of sick in the basin. And then coming into Pinedale was really dragging. Pinedale was a resupply town. And at this point, we were on a little bit of a time crunch because of Matt's schedule. And also Matt's a little more intense than me. And so in 1,500 miles, we'd only taken one day off and we'd biked every other day. And so I was tired. I was dealing with like a lot of saddle sore issues, and some bike fit issues. And I said, Matt, like my legs are smoked. I need a break. I can't keep climbing this much, every day. And so anyway, we had a break in Steamboat Springs and we hadn't had another break. And so in Pinedale, Matt got really sick overnight in Pinedale. I said, okay, well, we're not going to bike out of here in the morning. That's insane. So we got us a hotel room and we switched hotels. And then biked out the next day. He said he was good to leave. And he ended up not being okay. So we made it 50 miles out. We're at this really small lake. No, it was just like it was a named lake, but it wasn't signed or anything at the lake. So it wasn't like a destination or anything. Up this incredibly rugged road. And he ended up getting really sick that night, like debilitatingly unwell. I thought, like, symptoms of appendicitis, but in both lower quadrants of his stomach. And so, we ended up having to use an inReach to call search and rescue and set up a search and rescue, just SAR extraction from Teton County SAR.
You hit the legendary SOS button or what?
Kind of, yeah. So there was another family. It's a long story, but there's another family at a campsite who was able to like kind of coordinate with their family out there, and so their family members back in civilization were able to get in touch and like kind of triangulate between Teton County SAR and then I can't remember what the county is that Pinedale was in, but they kind of like we got our wires crossed a little bit. So eventually it took about 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Yeah, it took just about 5 hours to get search and rescue out there on they had a long way to get back into where we were, and they ended up having to use their ATV because it was passable with a truck, but very, very, it was extremely rough road that we had biked in on, and Matt wasn't able to bike out. So so at that point, obviously, like his health and safety comes first. And so we said, okay, like this is it. We're not going to go any further. We've done 1,600 miles to the route, and then I've done whatever else I've done in Montana on past trips. Well, if we want to start in Banff,
like what the heck, like what was going on with them or what?
Okay. So SAR extraction. Yeah, I've told the story so many times that people hear like, why are you back? I'm like, and I'll end up writing about it, I'm sure. And I'll make my money back on the hotel rooms that I had to pay for. I love being an outdoor writer. I'm going to mine my Trava for $1 a word if I'm lucky, probably more like 20 cents a word. And so depending on the outlet. So what happened? So the SAR guys were great. And there was a long ride, and then got to the truck, and then kind of put Matt in the truck. They were able, so I thought we were gonna have to leave our bikes back there and lose the bikes. But because it was Teton County SAR, they do a lot of mountain bike rescue. So they had a bike rack on the back of this Razor. So they put our bikes on the bike rack, and bike racked all the way out, to their truck, to their SAR truck, and then brought him to the Jackson emergency room. And it was a severe GI virus, viral infection in his gut, coupled with severe dehydration and then weight loss. And so his body went into ketosis, which was, I think, part of, so like muscle, his body was like eating his own muscle.
Like rhabdo?
Not quite.
Not
so,
quite? Okay.
If you look at ketosis, it's really weird. So, he had like these burps that smelled like really bad Dr. Pepper. And
like a metallic, or I've heard like people talking about like metallic taste in their mouth, and like kind of acidic, kind of metallic, but really weirdly sweet. It was a horrifying night. I'd say like
out of all of the nights, I'm making light of it. But it was a little traumatizing. And I really, I didn't know what was wrong with him. And we were so far out there and so remote, and we had gotten there under our own power. And I looked at a map the day before and I was like, okay, if we leave Pinedale, like we're going to be really far from anything for a while. And that was, of course, I'm lying there at 3 a.m. while he's in this like severe distress, and really, really sick, and just thinking like, how are we going to get out of here?
Is he like losing fluids and stuff at that point, or?
He hadn't really been able to take in anything.
Okay.
And he had lost so much weight. And so, and I was just thinking like, on any other section of this route, we were getting buzzed by cars the whole time, and like four-wheelers and people on dirt bikes. But this had been so remote, like one of the quietest roads we'd been on, of course, for hours leading up to this lake. And so it was just hours of feeling so panicky and worried, and like, how, like, am I going to have to bike and leave him here and like go get help, or like, what are we going to do? So yeah, it was bad, and it was terrible experience.
Yeah. How did he contract like you said GI,
viral infection, they said. Yeah. Okay. I don't know. So one of the things that they asked us in the hospital was, are you guys using the same filter? Like, yeah, we both filter our water. We filtered everything. We use the same filter. Neither of us, he's a guide and I am a writer. And so, we don't put our water bottles in the water source. Like, we're really careful. We're more careful than a lot of people are, I think. And so I don't know what happened, and why I didn't get sick. I still wonder, kind of what was really going on, not to be like a conspiracy theorist, but it was so extreme. And it's been weeks now, and physically he's still not the same. So kind of, we've been back for several weeks.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's hear the conspiracy. I'm all about it.
I don't know. I don't know what the conspiracy. Yeah, he's gonna, like, I hope he doesn't listen to this. No, I'm just kidding. No, he knows. I already have I'm already talking to editors at Outside about writing about it, and like writing about search and rescue and kind of behind the scenes stuff. So yeah, no, it's cool to talk about it, but I really don't know what it is, and so we're in a slight disagreement about like the severity of the illness and kind of the impact after. I think it was maybe a GI virus that took hold a lot and really badly because his body was already kind of going into like ketosis and having, I'm going to sound like an idiot. I don't know, dude. I have
just
no
the difference
idea.
of him. He rides with his mouth open. You don't. So he swallowed all these bugs.
Yeah, he rides with his mouth open. And actually, I'm the one who's like gasping for air. So yeah, it was, I guess like to sum it up, it was an extremely traumatic way to end a trip that I've been planning for years. I will process everything by pitching articles about it and pitching essays and writing about it. And yeah, it was an incredible experience on the route. And then I had one of the worst experiences in the backcountry that I've ever had. And
I mean, anytime you're getting emergency pulled out, that's it's wild. I mean, right? It's kind of like, is that the first time you've ever had or been in a group that's had something like that? Yeah.
I've never even had to call like ski patrol because I twisted my ankle on the ski hill. It never in my wildest dreams would have thought that we'd be the one with an 8-hour SAR extraction.
Right. I think it's so easy to get confidence in that when you've spent hundreds of miles and hundreds of nights on trail. Yeah. It's just like that happens to everyone else. That doesn't happen to me, and totally. then bam, it just hits, and things can change so fast. So yeah, I mean, I'll tell it in a different podcast, but I kind of had one of those moments where I was like, dang, like some things can just change so quickly, even when you're, walking along in complete confidence, and you've always been able to. So it's a lesson, I think, to everyone just to be listening to, and being mindful of those kinds of things for sure. And then too, even with like the search and rescue, it sounds like they did an awesome job with you, but you're still waiting 5 hours. And I think sometimes people think like, oh, when I do hit that SOS button, like, man, they're just here. You know what I mean? They're here to grab you quick. And so all different experiences. I've heard all different experiences from getting search and rescue and pulled out. And so it's all good information to have, I think, for people.
Yeah, it's it definitely knocked me down a few pegs in just wariness and precautions and okay, you're not just because you've done this a lot and you're experienced and you're competent, it doesn't mean that you're immune from your partner getting a severe GI virus and not being able to get himself out of the backcountry. So yeah. Nope, it was, I just, no matter what. And also, I mean, that's an illness. Forget rock fall, forget missteps, forget injuries, forget snake bite, but if you start to think about that, you're never going to leave your house again. So
let's put that in a box over here. We'll leave it.
Yeah.
So what did you think of bikepacking? I think you said earlier, like you'll do more bikepacking, but maybe not long distance bikepacking.
Yeah, I would like to finish the Great Divide. I'd like to piece together what I haven't done. And so kind of moving around the stuff I've done in Montana, I'd like to do the rest of Montana. So Southern Montana, I'd like to finish Wyoming, Southern Montana. And then I think that Banff to the border would just be the 4 or 5 days of biking. So I'd like to piece it together and finish it for sure. I said I'm not going to get back on my bike once we get back. And then I think it was a day and a half later, I signed up for a gravel race, Labor Day weekend. So now I'm training for that. I'm in great biking shape right now. Like, you
got to take advantage.
Exactly. Like I don't want to lose. I don't want to get out of this biking shape unless. So I'll do this bike race. It's just one day. My bike will be empty, and then So I'm loving being on my bike. I'm loving being in biking shape. And I would like to do more bike trips. I just don't know if I am a bike packer, like a career bike packer for months on end. Yeah, it was hard.
I've got two thoughts here. One, you said that bike packing a long trail was a lot harder than through hiking. Do you is that just globally? Like you just believe that still, or was that like the logistics of it specifically?
Just the logistics. I think. Okay. Because of the nature of at least a gravel route like this, there are definitely, I mean, when you see people bike packing the Colorado Trail, that is so hardcore. They're on mountain bikes. And so they're bike packing this insane single track. They're doing everything but the wilderness area. So they have those reroutes. I did the Colorado Trail a few years ago and saw the bike packers and just could not believe what they were doing. But something like the Great Divide, your terrain, if you look at, the vert per mile, it's going to be easier than a lot of through hiking trails, just nature of the beast. You're on gravel roads that have to follow a certain grade. So like more PCT grade, less AT grade than through hiking. But logistics were quite challenging. I had to do some bike repairs and we had to hitchhike off the route to get into Albuquerque where there was a bike shop. Because New Mexico also, you have 800 miles between Silver City, New Mexico, and then your first bike shop in Colorado. And so you have a long time. If something goes wrong with your bike and you have a serious mechanical, you have to figure out how to get yourself to a bike shop. And so we had to hitchhike with 2 bikes, and hitchhiking with 2 backpacks is fine. Hitchhiking with 2 bicycles, it was stressful. And then we had to figure out how to get back to the route. And so we had to find buses that would get us to within a certain distance of the route that had bike racks. And we couldn't, then the bike racks were full, so we had to bike on the highway. And so logistically, traveling around with a bike is harder than a backpack.
Yeah. All right. So next question here. And you can just choose to pass if you have nothing to share on this, but I'm just going to go out on some limbs here. Sure. There's some chatter out there, specifically in the endurance world, about how women actually do better at ultra long distances. Oh, yeah, right? Yeah. And I mean, there's women out there proving it. Like Courtney Dauwalter gets closer and closer. She's all out won endurance races with men and women in the field. She had a incredible performance at Hard Rock recently, but
she's so incredible. I love her.
She's it's insanity. And just Hard Rock in general, like, because we were just out there in the San Juans, right where, crossing paths with some of that. And it's just what those people can do is insane. And anyways, but going back to like your experience, you're saying like, Matt's like not ingesting enough calories. He's putting his body into like a severe ketosis, these kinds of things. And I've met Matt, and he's a very fit guy, but he's fairly skinny, if I remember right too. And
he's quite lean.
Yeah, he's really lean. So do you think that could have played a part into why he got into this kind of state? Do you think it was lack of a good diet, or do you think like, hey, like that's just like men have a bigger risk when they're doing these crazy, massive efforts for 30 days straight?
That's a good question. I think Physically, Matt is more physically capable than me. And also this can go in general, like biologically, men are just, I think, put together physically, they are faster and stronger. And that's why, we have separate categories for men and women. And so we don't compete, like I'm not competing directly against them. I'm not competing with Matt either. But physically he was faster than me and he could have done bigger miles than me if I wasn't with him. And he got sick. And I think I had, if we're talking about weight, I had more reserve than him. I'm like stature wise, I have more body fat and I had more reserve. So I didn't lose any weight on this route. My fat turned to muscle on it. But I lost no weight. I ended up 1,600 miles of biking. And I was like, really? I weighed the same. And Matt lost a significant amount of, oh God, I guess so. Kind of. Matt lost a significant amount of weight and his body really struggled. And I think, not all men are put together like that, but he's put together like that. And so I hold on to weight differently. But as far as, women performing better in long things, I have read that, men physically can outperform women and women can have stronger mental reserve. So when it comes down to it, and this is all anecdotal, this is just stuff I've read too in conversations I've had, that women are able to gut things out sometimes, like if we're looking at like percentage of finishers and where women finish and how like the bars get closer together the longer the distance is really interesting to me. And it seems to me that like either that's just like more ultra endurance capabilities, or it becomes a mental game once you're both at a peak physical fitness. So again, all anecdotal, but I have heard the same thing and I love it. I love that.
It's a super interesting concept. Like it really is. And I'm very excited for those ultra athletes to continue to push boundaries and hopefully uncover more of the science behind, these big efforts, massive distances, and like you say, that spread just getting closer and closer. And
it's so inspiring.
And maybe it is like partially, maybe there's some mental things, because I would say my tendency is going to be like even like you're describing, like if I was in Matt's place, like if I am capable of doing more miles, like, and I was solo, like I'm going to do more miles and then I'm going to just put myself at bigger risk to burn out. You know what I mean? Tortoise in the hair kind of thing. And so it is just all, I'm excited. Like people are pushing boundaries in sports right now. It'll be fun to continue to learn the science behind some of that. So
yeah.
You mentioned a few times. Yeah, seriously. You mentioned a few times about riding, and you're a career rider in the outdoor space as well as a horse stuntman. So we'll get into that in a second. But what is it like? I mean, one, how did you get into the outdoors, and then how did you wind up being a professional rider, and just kind of take us through that and what that's like.
Oh, sure. I kind of defaulted into writing because I fell into writing as a way to have the lifestyle that I have now. I want to make enough money where I'm not stressed about money, but I don't want me making money to impact what I do. And so it's kind of a balancing act there. And so I started out working more normal jobs. I worked at a hunting apparel company for a while, which I know we've talked about. I taught at a climbing gym. I was an art model. I've done every job. I was a barista forever. And then I was a managing editor for The Truck, which is a long distance backpacking kind of media conglomerate now. And then during COVID, I couldn't keep that job because of, their financial state during COVID. And so I started freelancing full time and thought, okay, if I can hack this, if I can make this work for a little bit and survive on freelancing income, that would be really cool because now I have no boss. And it turned out I could do it. And it was a lot easier than I thought because I already had a platform. I already had connections with editors and brands like you guys and PR agencies through The Trek, or people that I had known like kind of through the industry. So I just started snowballing and reaching out and endured a lot of rejection. I don't care about rejection. Who cares? Like, it's not personal. And if it is, that's their problem. And so I just started getting more and more bylines and started reaching out. And it's just, you just have to survive as a freelancer, you have to be both disciplined and you have to just always be selling yourself. So I'm a marketer for myself also. And once I wedge a foot in the door in a very competitive space, everyone wants to be an outdoor writer who's in this industry, who's like, in the outdoor space, because our lives are awesome and very free. And so once you get a foot in the door, you then have to be better. And by better, like not just writing better, but you have to be so easy to work with the editors, and you have to be reliable, and you have to file really clean copy, and you have to communicate well, and you have to be easy to work with, and you have to, you know, impress them with the copy that you turn in. You have to turn around your edits really quickly. And so if you do all those things and you make their lives easier, you will be the first person that they think about when they're going back to their writer pool for another assignment. Because when I had backpacking routes, my own website, and I was at the Trek. And so I took that information as an editor, and I thought, who are the freelancers who I like to work with the most? Who are the people I keep going back to over and over because they make my life easier on my end of the computer? And so that's what I do as a freelancer. And I think that's how I've gathered and maintained the number of clients that I have, and how I was able, we got off this road a month early, and I sent out a couple emails on the way back from Jackson because I'm insane. And, you know, by the time we got back, I'd already had I had a meeting, a phone meeting with the features editor for Outside. I had assignments for Travel and Leisure, 3 things for Runner's World. And then I write for The Strategist with New York Magazine. And I have a new contract with Adventure Cycling Association as an editor. And so that was all within about a week of being back. So
is it everything people dream about to be able to be kind of consider like your hobby, your career, you know, like,
yeah.
I think I get that a lot personally. And so it's something that, you wrestle with a little bit. I'm curious to hear your take on like, your job is your fun and your fun is your job. What do you think about that?
So I don't know about you, but for me, again, I chased the lifestyle. I realized that I could have a super flexible life, make decent money for not a ton of hours, depending on who the contract is with. And then I could get pickier and pickier about who I wrote for. And if the writing was too high maintenance, or the editor was challenging to work with, or the pay rate wasn't good for what I was doing, then I didn't have to take the job anymore. And so I want to write for people who will expand my portfolio, editors who I'm inspired by, publications that I respect. Or if I'm writing e-commerce, which is just like what we're all doing a lot of these days, which is writing, you know, the best backpacks, the best running. I wrote like 6 running shorts articles this spring because everyone wanted to know what I thought about running shorts. Where's it going with this? Oh yeah, it comes with the territory. And so you have to take the assignments that you don't really want. You have to do the jobs that you don't want. Because it's part of where the industry is at. And so I can be sort of picky, but I can't really be that picky. And I chase the lifestyle, not necessarily like I'm not incredibly inspired writing my 6th article about running shorts. But did it help me pay my mortgage this month? Absolutely. And then, can I go, you know, off on a bike trip for 35 days and then come back and get more work? Yeah. And so it's the lifestyle that it affords us. You know, you work for yourself. In a much bigger way than I do. I'm just my own LLC. You have an entire company. So,
I think that's kind of, that resonates with me. It's like, what I tell people is like, I would not do anything different. I love what I do. I love that, you know, my hobbies are my, you know, part of my career. And that line is very gray. You know, it's not black and white when I'm, say, on the clock or off the clock type of thing.
Yeah.
But I think also people have to realize, like, you don't turn it off when you go in the backcountry, right? So, like, we're out there hiking and it's like we're filming, you know?
Yeah,
and so you're pulling out the camera, or I'm sure the whole ride you're thinking like, oh, I need to write down this headline. That could be a great story. Or like, it's just, you don't turn it off, right? And so there's pros and cons to it. But I mean, overall, like, I wouldn't have it any other way.
No, that's a really good point. Actually, I have a notes app. It was GDMBR, Great Divide Mountain Bike Route. And I wrote down notes from each day. They're not eloquent. They're not like, you know, they're not sexy. It's just like my butt hurts. But then it was also, this was really interesting. Matt and I screwed up a lot with mechanicals. So this would be a really interesting angle for a story. And so then I put a little asterisk next to that and I write that down. I was on the Arizona Trail, and one of the backpackers I was with that day drank from his dirty water bottle. And this guy was like a career through hiker. And so I was like, oh, that's really interesting. Sorry, dude. Hope you don't get giardia. But this experience through hiking.
Here's an aqua tab. Eat it real quick.
Exactly. Yeah. You know, purify your gut. But I was like, that's interesting. Like, I screwed up my phone charger. I brought the wrong cable for my phone charger because I got too confident. And so then when I got back, I wrote an article for Outside about how experienced people in the backcountry make the dumbest mistakes. And so that came because, this poor hiker drank from his dirty bottle after he, through hiked thousands of miles already that year. And so, yeah, I never turn it off. I'm always taking pictures because not just, of myself, who cares about what I look like, but I need a generic shot of this. Oh, this is going to be good because I don't have very many campsite pictures. When we were on our trip in Zion, I made sure to get a lot of camp pictures because the light was great. And so if I write a generic article that has camping, now I have photos of a campsite. And so my brain is never turned off. And so I guess, yeah, like I never go out and I'm just out there. I'm always, this could eventually be a story. Or I'm also testing gear all the time too. Right. I got a couple of packs from you guys that I still have to get out and test now that I'm off the bike. And so, not have to, but I'm going to. And so every time I go out, I'm wearing something new. I'm using something different. Oh, like I shouldn't use this filter because I haven't used this one yet. And I need to know how fast is this one clock? How do I clean it? And so, yeah, for me, I test so much gear every season that it's also about, getting everything tested, and I have notes, and I guess I'm always working.
Yeah, that's kind of it. Like you enjoy your work, but at the same time, it's almost like you work more hours in a lot of ways. You don't you don't have like that separation right down the middle that you can disconnect. If I was a dentist, right, like I leave the office, and if I'm backpacking, I'm sure I'm not like getting ideas for work, or whatever it is.
About teeth.
Yeah, hopefully. No, it's true, though. If I am, that's a problem. But it's an interesting thing. But I mean, obviously, an outdoor writer, I feel like, is probably a lot of people's dream job. So I'm always curious to ask a few questions on it.
I love it.
You do some crazy things for work, though, Maggie. I mean, you also fall off of horses on purpose for money.
For money. Yeah, this is all for money.
Yeah, it's it is. So it's like you're a stunt writer for movie sets and things like that. I'm trying to decide how much I want to get into that because that's a whole another can of worms. God. So let me start with this, though. Now that you've ridden a bike, across the country, like I'm sitting here thinking, you're talking about like, oh, I don't know the mechanicals of this and this and this. Like, have you ever considered doing some kind of long distance horse trip? Like do people do that? Like really long distance horse, you know what I mean? Like I've heard of people like going through mountain ranges or something like that, but nothing more than that.
People across the country on horses. Yeah. There's this incredible account online. This girl doesn't know who I am, and she'd be so creeped out if she ever heard this, but it's called Through Rider. And she's ridden the PCT. I think she's ridden the CDT. She's ridden across the country multiple times with her pack string. And so a pack string, you have your saddle horse who you ride, and then you have your pack horses who are carrying your gear. I actually, a couple guys I know I used to work in national parks as a horseback guide, and I knew a couple guys there who were riding across the country, and they ended up making the movie Unbranded, which is an incredible documentary about wild Mustangs and just kind of the state of Mustangs in the country. And they rode Mustangs across the entire country. Look it up. It's a really cool documentary. It was on Netflix for a while. But Ben Masters is the guy I know from that group. And I did a pack trip with him. So I've packed horses, but right now, Tayson, I just kind of want to chill. Yeah. I want to like go on day rides and then come back home and open my refrigerator and have a cold Dr. Pepper.
I think you've earned that.
Food bag.
You need some big resets. I was just curious if that was like really a thing out there to do cross country horse rides and stuff like that. So that's
Look at that documentary. It's really cool. It's family friendly.
Unbranded. Okay.
Unbranded. Yep. Ben Masters.
Yeah. I grew up around horses just a little bit. And I'm like, I like horses and whatnot, but my wife, I think she really loves horses and she's always talking. So maybe one day I'll have to get a horse, but she would for sure watch a movie about horses with me. So
you'll love it. She'll love it.
Wild Mustang. Her like Spirit, the cartoon.
Stallion is a Cimarron, duh.
Yes. That's like her.
I'm a weird horse girl. I'm a weird cat lady.
Oh yeah. That's like her dream. She has my 4-year-old daughter watch it all the time, and I'm like, I think she likes it, but I think you love it,
I was gonna say, is this your wife who wants to watch it, and you're just planting your daughter there?
Exactly.
It's a great movie.
Oh, okay. I want to respect your time. We're almost out, but I feel like we teased it a little bit, and so I do want to just maybe give us like a 10,000-foot view of what it's like to be a horse stunt person for movies.
Oh, it is good money.
Okay.
It's cool. So yeah, a lot of what you're doing, a lot of it's not super dramatic. You're not, doing, flying leaps off horses. I've done Angel of Death where you get shot from behind and you have a squib go off on your back, which is a little like shock thing that explodes fake blood out of a hole. So it's a tiny explosive that they put in your clothing. And then the special effects is off in the distance with the remote. And then they remote it. Once the squib goes off, you like, your arms go out and then you fall forward over the saddle. And then your horse gallops over the rise with you hanging on its neck or just like face down on its neck. A lot of it is doubling actors who can't ride. And so not only are you like, you're not like doing big dramatic things, you're just galloping on a horse, or you're pulling a gun out as you're riding on a horse, you're galloping up and then you're jumping off the horse, you're running and you're jumping on a horse, you're like, it's all the things that a lot of times actors can't do or shouldn't do. And so, but it's fun. Days on set are super long. I'm a film wrangler, so I work with horses on movie sets. I help train actors. I ride horses. I double for actors. On set right now, everything's on hold because of the writer's strike and the SAG strike. So no movies this fall. But I respect the strikers, obviously. And I'm IATSE, like local 488 union for shows. And so, it's, feature films that I've done out here, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, days are 12 hours long per SAG regulations with 12-hour turnaround. And they're long and they could be really stressful sometimes because you have actors and horses. And then you have your own stuff that you're doing on camera. And it's really cool. It's just this random thing I started doing because they needed help as a production assistant. And then I got in with this horse group, this wrangler group, and kind of showed them I knew how to ride horses and just like warmed my way in doing a little bit at a time until they started hiring me on as crew. And this was years ago now. So I do that on the side also.
Interesting. Yeah. Super interesting. On the side, you also have a website that you work with, right? Bikepacking Routes, right? Is there more than one or just the one? I can't even remember. You've got your hands in so many things. Okay. I looked up a route. I looked up the Highline, the Utah Highline route, and thought its write-up was pretty good. So it's a really cool resource. Like,
trying to see who wrote that. We're kind of struggling with Google's algorithm right now. Our keywords are not popping up. So my partner in that, Jeff Garmeyer, who I know you've interviewed for this too. It's a small ultra endurance world out there. So he's kind of looking into that right now. But Backpacking Routes was a pandemic project for us in 2020. And we hire writers who have hiked the routes, and then they have a GPX track. And so it's just like this conglomeration of routes that maybe aren't as popular. And you can sort it on the top by distance, by region, by difficulty, physical, and difficulty logistical. Like logistical route for getting my bike to New Mexico was really hard. But then, so like a loop with easy parking and no permits would be logistically easy, but maybe it's physically hard if there's a lot of vertical gain. Whereas like a route that has permitting and itineraries and like a point-to-point shuttle would be like logistically challenging, if that makes sense. So it's kind of for people who were thinking, okay, I have 5 days, I live in Utah and I want to hike in the fall. So they can go to the region, which is I think Mountain West for Utah. And then they can see like, okay, here are 5 to 7 day trips in Utah. And then they can download the GPX track. It's super easy. And then all of our writers have done it, have photographed it, and have tracked it themselves. So we have a lot of routes on there, and we're going to have more. We're just trying to figure out what this Google thing is happening right now, but you should look it up because it's awesome.
It's a super cool way of filtering out like what you're looking for in a route, right? So it is really cool. So go check it out. Backpacking Routes, definitely a website worth your time. Anywhere else that people should look for you? Obviously, they'll see your name from time to time in different magazines, publications. Anywhere else that you want people to connect with you?
Oh no, I just love when people tell me that they've hiked something that they found on Backpacking Routes. It makes me so happy. Because we put like that, we don't make any money on it. All the money that we get from people clicking on gear or anything goes straight to the retail of our writers. So it goes right to the writers. So that's just a fun project. No, just reach out if you want to say hi or ask a question. And then, I think people just kind of see me on the internet just because my name is places.
Yeah. So like reach out via like Instagram, or do you have a website or? Okay.
Yeah, I respond to DMs a lot, mostly because I'm avoiding my work. But then it's really fun to talk to people who have read something that they liked. Or I really enjoy hearing from people.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate you coming on the show. It's very interesting to hear just about bike packing in general, but obviously this is a very unique trip. And just kind of from a perspective that I think is it resonates with me as someone who's not just a diehard bike packer, has a lot of questions around it. I think coming off of the Colorado Trail and seeing, like you said, so many bike packers, a lot of full suspension bike packers,
crazy,
just kind of has my wheels turning of what that would be like, what's attractive about it, what's not attractive about it. So yeah, just a
I know
really
you're going to end up
experience.
doing it now. You guys you're all going to end up on a bike packing trip with Outdoor Vitals.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it could happen. I would never say never, but I will say this, going back to that conversation of being like working in your space, sometimes I have to be selective to not cross-pollinate other outdoor hobbies with my work hobbies so that I can feel like when I go and do this activity outdoors, it's a true like separation.
That's really healthy.
Yeah, I kind of fell into that, and then as it developed over time, I'm like, oh man, this is actually really nice. Like I've learned to love it. Bike packing seems to be the one that's getting grayer and grayer, and be something that could for sure happen. But there's some other ones that I'll probably hold a little closer to the chest as just for me, work separation things. But yeah, I keep talking to more and more bike packers, so I think it's going to have to happen at some point.
I'm sure it will. Yeah. And I want you to tell me if you think it's easier or harder than backpacking, because I feel like I'm the only one who's like, that was way harder than backpacking. Everyone's like, what is wrong with you? That's a really long podcast. What's wrong with me? But I can tell you right now, it's going to be harder on my butt. Just like you mentioned, like I can't imagine that side of things. So we'll see if I can even survive the first week or I've written a lot about bike shorts
days.
recently. So let me know if you have any bike shorts questions. I'll send you my links.
Yeah. Get the whole rundown of your 6 articles on biking shorts and running shorts.
Seriously.
Okay. Well, thanks so much, everyone. Go check out Maggie's website, Backpacking Roots. You can hit her up on Instagram, see more of her awesome adventures. And again, thanks so much for coming on the show, Maggie.
Thank you so much. This is so fun. Thanks for chatting with me.
Yeah, for sure. All right. I hope you guys enjoyed that episode with Maggie. She is a ton of fun. She is a avid outdoorsman, that's for sure. And that's very apparent through that conversation. When we were out in Zion National Park with her, she was just as comfortable there as anywhere else. Just a true, authentic, amazing writer. So make sure to look for her articles around the web and in different magazines and publications. She definitely knows her stuff and spends a ton of time being a Montana native and someone who just lives and breathes for the outdoors. So thanks again, Maggie, for coming on. If you have not yet rated and reviewed this podcast, please do so. It really makes a difference in us putting together this content and growing our podcast and helping more people get outdoors. And disconnect from all this craziness and reconnect with themselves. So we really appreciate you guys rating and sharing this podcast. Make sure you guys are subscribed, and we'll see you guys on the next episode.